Hello and welcome to Montmart TV. In today's lesson, I'll be giving you a little introduction in watercolour materials and techniques. Now the first thing I'd like to talk about is brushes. And for watercolour, you need a nice soft brush. Although there's lots that you can use, the ones I have laid out here are my personal favourites, and I'll give you a quick rundown on them. The first brush is the Taklon Rigger. And a rigger has very long filaments. They're great for fine lines and they hold a lot of pigment. The next brush is a round, and it's a general purpose brush that also holds a lot of pigment. For laying down a wash, I like to use a nice flat Taklon brush. These come in 25, 50mm and a 75mm Taklon brush. Now this brush is very handy for laying on water onto your paper. The next set is the camel hair brush, and these are a natural filament, so they handle the pigment very nicely. These fat liners are a new concept in brush, and they are a rigger and a round in the one brush. So the round actually acts like a reservoir to hold the paint. The final brush is probably my favourite due to its versatility, and that is the traditional squirrel mop brush. It holds a lot of pigment, but it also takes a very fine point. Paper. Now watercolour paper is not like normal paper. It must be a lot more robust, so the structure does not change when water is applied, and so we don't get buckling. Now I have 3 types of paper here that I like to use. This first pad contains 12 sheets of English made cotton paper. It is a 280 GSM weight, and due to the strength gained from the cotton is just perfect for wet painting techniques. The paper in this next pad is a medium tooth German made paper with a weight of 180 GSM. This third type is my personal favourite. It has a weight of 300 GSM and features a rough tooth on one side and a medium tooth on the other. The last important factor is of course the paint. And I have 4 different types of watercolour paint here. This first set is the Montmart Watercolour Travel Set. And these are in cake form. And there's 18 colours, and you can see that it's quite small and transportable. The next set is the watercolour cake set, and it comes in this fantastic little case. You get 18 vibrant colours in the kit, along with a sponge, a palette and a brush. The third set is the 17-piece palette and paint set, and this paint is in fluid form already. This one comes in 15 colours. The last set is my favourite. You get 12 tubes in the kit, and I think it's a great range. So now that we are materials experts, let's explore some techniques. And the first technique we're going to explore is the basic wash. Washes are an integral part of watercolour painting, and they're easy with a bit of practice. So moisten the brush and lay the paint horizontally across the page. Charge the brush again and move down the page, slightly overlapping the previous strip. This wash is very dark, but if I wet the page first, the wash would be half the strength. Well, let's take it a step further and do a graded wash. And a graded wash goes from dark to light. Add a little water to the raw pigment and lay in a strip across the top of the sheet. As you work down the paper, clean the brush in water to remove the pigment and continue to work across the page and moving down. The pigment will run out and the resulting hue will be lighter. By the time I get to the bottom of the page, there is next to no pigment on the paper at all. Let's take it one step further again and create a variegated wash. Now a variegated wash is when one colour blends into another. Start your wash the same way as you did for the graded wash and lay in a strip of strong pigment across the top. Then add water to dilute the colour. Use a fair bit of water in this case as it helps the blending. Into the wet paint I add my next colour and repeat the process. There are so many ways to create washes. For example, I could wait for the yellow to dry,
Then turn the page upside down and make another graded wash, thereby creating a more harsher glazed blend. While your paint is still wet, you can make adjustments to the wash's strength.
Now for some wet on wet. And I think this is probably the most exciting technique of all. It's just so unpredictable and crazy.
For this exercise, I lay out two colours, in this case phthalo and brilliant red. I then lay in some water onto the paper with my mop brush. The more water applied, the more thoroughly the pigments will blend.
While the page is still wet, then we drop our colour in.
I drop the colour in quite randomly and manipulate the pigment, again in no particular order. I then clean the brush and drop in the next colour. I then let fate and chance do the rest. This occurrence of natural pigment reaction can really make a painting. I just love happy accidents.
The next technique I'm going to show you is a glaze. And quite simply, that is one translucent colour on top of another colour.
So over my previous dark wash, I charge my brush with some crimson and lay down a strip of colour. See how the resulting hue has come out looking purple. You can lay consecutive layers over one another and each one will be darker than the last. Try it with other combinations as well.
Next, let's look at dry brushing, and this creates a lovely broken texture.
The trick here is not to charge your brush with too much paint. Just drag the brush over the surface. The paint will only come into contact with the high points of the paper.
Blooms. Now what's a bloom? Well, it's hard to explain, so just watch. I'm going to lay down a wash.
Make the wash fairly wet.
Well, I think that's dry enough. Let's create our bloom. And I'm using a slightly darker blue to show it.
The wash is half dry. Drop in the other colour. Notice as the paint is drying the unusual pattern forming. That's a bloom, and it happens because the second wash dislodges the underlying pigment.
You can also create a broken texture by repelling the paint, and you can do this with a simple wax crayon like this.
I'm using a coloured crayon to demonstrate here, but if you use a white, it creates a masked effect. As you lay the wash over the paper, you will notice the wax repels the water under the paint.
Now, while that sheet is still a little bit wet, I'll show you another handy technique, and that is removing colour. And it can quite easily be done with a household paper towel or a tissue. Have a look at this.
This technique is good for fixing up mistakes, as well as lightening areas prior to painting.
The last fun effect I'm going to show you is a little bit scientific, and that's dropping salt onto your damp painting. This creates a really nice effect. Have a look at it.
Don't worry, I'm not going to eat my painting. I'm creating an unpredictable pattern with salt crystals.
Well, that concludes our watercolour techniques lesson. And hey, if you'd like to learn a little bit more, then check out the lesson plans on our webpage, montmart.net. Until next time, keep on painting.